Hello, my name is Faina, and I have dedicated the last 7 years to honing my craft and fine tuning my strategy.
Welcome to Trading in the Zen, where we help traders find their groove. I'm your co-host, Louise Nonweiler, a trading psychologist and multi-award-winning clinical hypnotherapist. Join us weekly as we delve into the trading world, exploring psychology, well-being, health, and mindset. Through expert insight, interviews, and actionable strategies, we help you as traders unlock the mindset needed to navigate markets with confidence and achieve peak performance.
At Trading in the Zen, we believe that there's much more to trading than numbers and probabilities. Like an athlete, a trader should operate in their peak state. Each week, you will have mind-blowing interviews as well as actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become a better trader. Thanks for spending time with us today. Now, let's dive right in. Welcome to Trading in the Zen. In this episode, we catch up with our old friend, Lawrence Dunning. Lawrence was actually one of our first guests when we started the podcast. We will be speaking about fatherhood, trading, jiu-jitsu, and real estate. Let's dig in. Welcome to Trading in the Zen. Today we have someone special. Today we have Lawrence. Actually, Lawrence was one of our first guests when we first started our podcast. And he was such a great conversation we had that we just could not wait to get him back. And it took us a few tries, but here we are. Welcome to the show, Lawrence.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be talking to both of you.
Welcome on the show, Lawrence. It's lovely to have you back.
Thank you.
So, Lawrence, since, we're kind of friends on Instagram now, and I've been following your life and not stalking, following. I just want to have that disclaimer, just simply following. I think there's a difference. And I see, you being a family man and you're raising your little boy. And I keep watching. You have such a great family dynamic with your wife and with your son. What are like the biggest lessons you've learned being a dad? And what are the biggest two lessons you learned being a husband?
What wonderful question. So I'll start with the husband because obviously that came first. When we first started dating, my wife's a therapist, but when we first started dating, she wasn't a therapist. She didn't have the qualifications, but I would hear her on the phone to her friends, and I would tell her, listen, you're a therapist. I know you don't have the degree, but I convinced her to change careers, and then she got her therapy degree. And now she's so happy being a therapist. And she used to say to me when we would fight, she said, "I think you're fighting your ex-girlfriend. You're fighting your past or your pasts, whatever it was." And so the first thing I've learned from being married, specifically, she's helped me with, is being in the moment. Like so many times we have all our past resentments or our past fears or our past angers, and we bring them from the past into the present when they're not really, relatable to that instance. So that's really helped me just to fight better. I think a good relationship, you're always going to bicker. It's like if you go on vacation with your best friend for a week, you're probably going to bicker once or twice, or they're going to annoy you just because you're around them all the time. So I think a good marriage or a good relationship is not about no conflict. It's about conflict resolution and resolving conflict well. So I definitely think that's one of the things I've learned. And the other thing is just communication. I think just having the confidence to I don't want to say bear all because you want to keep a little bit of romance in there, but just to be vulnerable with each other and spend time talking because we're so distracted. You see those memes about, there's that lovely meme with two people sitting together, but maybe their backs are to each other and they're both on their phone and they're not really connected. They're together, but they're not, together. And I think you got to spend time in any relationship where you actually just talk about things and just have those conversations. And sometimes it'll be late at night, my son will fall asleep and we'll just lie on the bed and we'll talk for 90 minutes and just about, trying to get on the same page understand where we're both trying to go. Because I think a good relationship is we each have our own individual goals and then we have kind of the family unit goals, and they've all got to kind of work together. I think it would be really unfair if I had all these personal goals and then she only had family goals, or she had all these personal goals and I was only thinking about the family. We have to make sure that we're all working to be happy and do things that enrich us, because I think I'll be a better husband if I'm doing things that make me as a person happy. And then if I'm a better husband and we have a better connection, we're going to be better parents. So I think, but it all leads to you being happier. So I would say that they're definitely the two biggest lessons for marriage. And the fatherhood one is beautiful, Tana, because if you'd asked me at 41, have you got a pretty good idea on what life's about and things like that? I would have said yes, because I was always a very inquisitive person. I've been a huge reader since I was in my teens. I probably read a book on average the last 25 years, a book a week. So I read, thousands of books, and I've always been so curious. But the one thing I didn't know is I didn't know what I didn't know. And now I know what I don't know a lot more. And I would say it's kind of a weird thing, but one of my strengths is I know my weaknesses. And I feel like every day I'll say to somebody, I'm not sure, let me get back to you on that. And too many people go through life thinking they have all the answers, and clearly they don't. So I think having my son has made me realize, before him, I kind of went through an early midlife crisis where I was a bit depressed, and I could never imagine a time happier than when I was 35. I was this wealthy guy. I just retired from fighting. I was in such physical shape, and I lived this extravagant lifestyle, traveling around the world. And I thought, I'll never be as happy again, even if I lost a bunch of my money. But even if I get the wealth back, I'll just be older and more tired, and I won't be in such good shape. And so that was my mindset. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And now what I know is I get so much happiness out of just seeing him giggle. It's like the smallest things. Like when I was young, I thought I had to tick this big box, this big goal, and achieve this great thing to be happy. And now I feel like fatherhood has just made me so much more content in the tiniest things. And I think the one realization I've got now is I want to have as many wonderful moments every day for as many days as I can for the rest of my life. And I would consider this one, I know it's later for you, Louise, but for me, it's 10:30 in the morning. I've already been in my ice plunge. I've done a bit of work this morning. I've had a bulletproof coffee, and I'm having a wonderful conversation with both of you. And for me, like, this is exactly one of those little pleasures. Like, I don't need huge things to be happy. I really want to relish the smaller things in life.
Thank you for sharing that, Lawrence. I think, we love talking to you. You're such an inspiration, and it's just, we can talk for hours, and there's so much to talk about. There's real estate, trading, you used to be a trader, martial arts, and obviously your family as well. So, but I'm going to go slightly off track, and I want to talk about running marathons, or you running marathons. I personally never run a marathon, but this is absolutely remarkable and inspiring. You have run, and quote me if I'm wrong, you've run marathons on all 7 continents. So well done, congratulations. Fantastic. Let's talk more about that.
So when I was young, I think I've had these different stages of my life, and for a long time, I didn't quite realize what it was. But now I do. I was trying to get a bulletproof mind. And in order to do that, I have to push myself physically, do things that I don't want to do. And I'm 190 pounds. Most runners, the good runners, are a little bit lighter, and I'm not really built for running. But so I always found long distance running challenging, and it was more for my mind than my body, if that makes sense. So I started running marathons just to really push my mind. And I would do it when I was fighting, between fights, and I would just do it to keep goals and keep me interested and motivated. And then I'm a naturally curious person, so I love to travel. And I didn't realize it, but I'd done marathons on 5 continents. And I was like, well, now I've got to do all 7, because I just, without specifically having the goal, I was just, traveling to different places, and I'll do a marathon in this place. So it was really wonderful, because the last one was the most, inaccessible, is Antarctica. And so I went to Antarctica to run a marathon. But what I didn't realize is that week, it was almost, without exaggerating, it was almost a spiritual experience, because it's such an isolated place. And my wife and I were with 2 other couples. There was 6 of us, and of course the support staff. And it was such an incredible experience. And it's so funny to say, but one of the biggest things was being completely isolated from connection. So the 2 guys I was with were both older than me. They were very successful CEOs. They didn't run the marathon. They just went for the trip. And so all of us had no cell phone connection. And one of them had a company with 14,000 employees. He was so overwhelmed with life that he was just so happy to be I can just breathe now and just think and talk. And so every day we shared breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. And just those conversations with the 2 of them and their wives, that was so special. Just, I feel like I grew as a person in wisdom. And then the marathon was really I trained really, really hard because a funny story. The year before, I went to Cape Town because you depart from Cape Town, and I was supposed to run the marathon. I trained all winter in Chicago, and it's over Christmas is when you go. And so I get to Cape Town, I get to the airport to fly to Antarctica, and the owner of the organization of the trip comes on. He says, "Guys, there's been an outbreak of COVID at the camp. We have to cancel the trip." And some of the guys I was with, they're like high-powered CEOs, alpha types, like no, they're not going to take no for an answer. So they're arguing with this guy, like, listen, we've already had vaccinations, like we're signed waivers, we've come all this way, we're going to go. And he's like, listen, I can lose my license, you can't go. What I can do is we have to fly supplies out, so you can go with the supply plane, you can stay for 4 hours. While we're unloading and loading up the plane, you can do a hike, don't see anybody, and then you can come back with the plane. That's on us to say sorry. And then you come back next year and you do it again. So that's what we did. So I was so bummed out. I've been training all winter, these long runs in Chicago when it was snowing, these 20-mile training runs. I'm like, this sucks. I was so bummed out. So we get there, we do this hike, and I realized that it's way colder and it's going to be way harder than I thought. So that was wonderful because then I had a whole nother year and another winter to train much harder. So I trained really hard. And the marathon, I got so lucky. The sun came out and I had a window of about 3.5 hours where it was just beautiful weather. And I was actually almost overdressed. And it was just so peaceful. It was just me. I had this route mapped out. And it was just really, really wonderful. It was the perfect conditions. And I was so happy. And it was just such like, instead of just ticking the box and being happy, I was actually happy while I was doing it, because that's something I'm trying to do more of, just be in the moment and be more present when I'm doing something. And then the last mile, there was this crazy blizzard and I barely made it in. And they said, listen, if you'd left 10 minutes later, would have stopped it. You got so lucky. I just got the perfect window. But that was just so wonderful, because it's this thing that I'm trying to do now, where I'm trying to be more present when I'm doing these things. So when again, like talking about, I have a cool resume in the fact that I've done interesting things, but a lot of the time when I was doing them, I was so nervous about it, I didn't really enjoy it. So back to in my fighting days, if you'd asked me a month before every fight, if you could click your fingers and just fast forward the next month of your life, would you do it? And I would have 100% done it, because I didn't want to, it was so stressful, and the nerves and the diet, and you're worried about injuries, and the last month always sucked. And it was like that every single time until I knew I was going to retire. And then I said, I'm going to enjoy this because it's the last time I do it. And it was the same experience, but because I had a different mindset, the whole thing was wonderful. It was much less stressful, and I really enjoyed every aspect. And like, I remember every single moment. The other memories are like this blur, but I remember the last one. Luckily it went well and I won, but I remember the music came on and my coach is like, let's go. And I said, coach, give me a second. I'm breathing in every moment, And so it made me realize that we never know, like all three of us, there's things that we love doing, and we never know when it's going to be the last time we do them. So if we try and have that mindset where every time, like, I don't know, there's going to be a time where my son doesn't want me to pick him up anymore. There's going to be a time where I'm not going to go to the jiu-jitsu mats anymore. There's going to be a time that, there's going to be the last dinner that I have with one of my good friends. Like there'll be a last time for everything we love doing. So I really try to have that mindset. Like, don't wait for the last time and then miss it. Try to really relish the moments as you're in them. And I think that's what I got from Antarctica, is just, it's being so much more present. And also, I don't really have envy and jealousy too much, but like anyone, if you're struggling with money and you're around, a multimillionaire, you have those feelings, like kind of a pang of, oh, that's a little frustrating that I'm not there where I want to be. But just being around these insanely wealthy guys and seeing that they have more stress and more unhappiness than me, it's a really good reminder. So many times we see these really successful figures and we think, oh, it must be nice for them, they have no stress. And just being around these guys, who one of them he's from Dubai, he's hanging out with the crown prince, and he's like, Middle Eastern royalty almost, he has all these doors open to him, and he was just so stressed and overwhelmed and miserable. And it's like, man, that's the modern world, is as you tend to get more successful, there's so many demands on us, and with technology it's very hard to get a break. And so again, kind of like coming back to the beginning of the conversation, like, how nice is this? Like, one of the reasons I love these conversations is my phone's on silent and I'm alone and I'm present. And I just think that we live in an attention economy, and getting those moments is becoming harder and harder. So we really have to force it.
Definitely.
Yeah, while listening to you made me think of the book I just finished reading, and it is called The Surrender Experiment. And it's a book that I really recommend to everyone. And And basically, he lived in trust that whatever was happening for his good. And so instead of pushing against it, he just decided that whatever life was presenting, he was going to go that way. And it is such a great book. And so many amazing things happened to him, totally different from what he initially thought was going to happen. But every time he was presented with what he thought a challenge at the time, instead of pushing against it, he said, well, there's something there to explore. And he sort of dropped into it and said, okay, so show me where to go. And then the universe would, like God, whatever, one believes, would lead him in a direction. And he ended up living an incredible life, completely different. He was going to be like a monk who meditated, and he ended up owning 4 businesses and this temple where people meditated, and he had a construction company. And it's because he said yes. And every time something went against him, he just accepted that wasn't going to go. And I think all of your stories about getting on a plane and getting there and realizing that perhaps the conditions were not correct, and instead of pushing against it and just sitting in this sucks, you said, okay, well, you know what, maybe I wouldn't have done that great because the climate. So, like, it probably wasn't presented to you because you were not ready. Right. And so
Exactly.
there's so much
Well,
beauty in it. So I'm really trying to implement this in my life, where I feel like pushing towards something, I sit back and say, okay, maybe that's not the way. Show me how. And you
yes.
eventually being led. I think we're shown how a lot, but we miss it because we're so stuck on the idea of what we think it should be, that we don't allow the magic to show us how. Right? Like we don't.
I
I think we're missing a lot of opportunity there for the magic to occur. So that was, like, you made me think of it. I really highly recommend the book. I had a
that's beautiful.
question in terms of, thank you. I really think you should try to read the book. I recommend it to everyone. Like, I've been preaching it from like the mountaintops.
It's on my list.
But yeah, I've had him like audio. I don't care. Like, when you're on a toilet, listen to it. Just listen to it, because every time you feel like things are bad, maybe they're not bad. Maybe it's
Mhm.
just, a different way. So,
That's so
you
true
live such
because
a disciplined life. I'm sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say there's so many times where in the moment it seems so terrible. Like, for instance, I could look at my last breakup and it was a very toxic relationship, and I was so bummed out. I was like, man, I was in my late 30s and I'm like, I'm too old for these kind of relationships. I was embarrassed of myself and really down. But now, of course, that was the best thing that happened, because if I hadn't broken up with her, I wouldn't have met my wife. And there's so many instances like that. So I really love what you said. I just want to emphasize that when I was young, I thought that with a strong will, I can power through and create the life I want. And I still, to an extent, try to do that, but I'm way more flexible, knowing that sometimes roadblocks in life happens, and we have to listen and learn and be more flexible. So I really love that. The surrender experiment. I'm definitely, as I get older, I surrender more to life, and it's less about me trying to fight life and more about me accepting opportunities and resistance and trying to learn from it. So I'm really glad you said that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like God is saying, go this way, go this way. And we're like, no, I want to go that way, and like, okay, go your way. And you're like, oh, it's so hard. And the universe is like, well, I was saying, the spirit was like, go that way, but you're hell bent on going this way. So that's your opposition. Here you go. You
Mm.
happy now? So you have to, like, but it's hard because when you're really invested in an idea, right? You really want something, you lose, I think, you get so hyper focused that you sort of stop seeing everything around you,
Mm.
uh and there's so many signs to tell you something different, but we're just like hyper focused because whether it be society or we have to be successful, we have to be this. There's so much information now on social media, which causes this toxic comparison to everyone else who are just showing you their best day. No one tells you, like, I'm having a shit day today. Here it is on Instagram. I mean people do, and they cry. It's a whole other situation, like with the dirty laundry situation. But anyway, but no one's gonna, like, willingly be like, hey, let me show you my worst day. Here's me unmotivated in bed crying with cookies in hand. So we, like, don't allow ourselves grace. We don't allow ourselves grace. Like, it's okay to have crap days. It's okay to say, I don't want to get up today. It's not okay to stay there, but I feel like we're being pushed so much to perform and
be the best versions, but sometimes it's just shit day, you're
Exactly.
allowed. I think we give
And
so much grace to so many people and so little to ourselves.
that's so true. Listen, we're human. I love that expression or the saying where you should talk to yourself as you talk to your best friend. So if my best friend came to me and he's like, feel like a loser, I've spent 3 days in bed, I'm depressed. I'm not going to yell at him. I'll be like, brother, it's okay. You're human. But if I did it, I'd probably be way harder on myself. So that's something that having a bit of compassion. Listen, we're human. We make mistakes. We're not robots, So I really agree with that.
Yeah. The thing I take now, and I've actually kind of trained my mindset, and I think we're all very similar. I believe there's a lesson or lessons and blessings in everything. So for me now, I've almost subconsciously trained myself. If something doesn't go to plan, yes, I feel the emotions. I go through them. I don't suppress them. I do get frustrated. But in an invisible world, I know that there is something different. And I'm like, do you know what? I'm just going to wait. And now having that mindset, I get goosebumps talking about it. But having that kind of approach has really helped me to kind of just let things flowing. And I'm like, so that's what it was like. And I think we've all got that kind of mindset, haven't we? And I think it's good to have, but at the same time, we're human, aren't we? We have emotions, we have frustrations. We're very much forward thinking and trying to achieve. Yes. And that it can be difficult to find that balance, can't it?
Yes, well, definitely what you said, Louise, in jiu-jitsu, there's a saying, when you compete, you either win or you learn. And that's just, so instead of taking a defeat like, oh, I suck, I lost, it's like, that's a wonderful lesson you just got. So it's just trying to reframe things. So you're either winning in life or you're learning lessons. And that's an old trading saying, isn't it? It's like when you first start trading and you lose money, that's the tuition fees of learning how to trade. And I remember when I first started, my first day in the trading pit, I was working for this company, and then they said, okay, Lawrence, you're on your own. You got your badge, go down. I think I got my badge at 12:30, and the pit closed at 2 o'clock. So I had an hour and a half. They said, go on, get your own position. I was trading 5-year bond options. And I did a couple of trades. The market moved against me, and I was down 10 grand in an hour and a half as a 23-year-old. And I'm like, man, that really sucks. But it's like, that's I was just learning, like you have to start somewhere. The position moved against me. All the guys in the pit had the opposite position, did well. And I was like, oh, that was an expensive lesson, an hour and a half, for a young guy. But the next couple of days I made it all back. So it's those tuition fees that you learn in life. And I think that's a really good philosophy. So you're not changing what happens to you, you're changing your perception of it. And I really think that's the key to happiness, is instead of saying I want X, Y, Z, and then I'll be happy, you say, I'm just going to be happy with what I have and do the best in my situation.
Yeah. I love that.
And then those days, like when you don't feel like, because you have a big load, right? You have a family, you have a business, you're running marathons, you have jiu-jitsu. On the days where you feel unmotivated, how do you get yourself all jazzed up? Because I don't believe that everyone, even highest performers, have down days. Do you allow yourself to have a down day, or how do you pep talk yourself?
Well, I think when you don't feel like it, so there's motivation and there's discipline, and discipline is doing things that you don't want to do, but they're good for you. So I would say I love the ice plunge. I have one in my basement now, and every morning I get in that thing, and I don't want to do it. I don't like the mornings. I don't like cold. And but I know when I get out of it, I'm gonna have all these endorphins, and I'm gonna feel so much better. And what's wonderful about that is I actually got it for my health, for anti-inflammatory reasons. And now there's all these studies coming about the mental benefits, about how when you get out of cold exposure, you're very happy. You have all these endorphins. And so I think it's just that there's definitely things, and especially the older I get, there's so many times I'll go to the gym, and I go to my jiu-jitsu gym, and I'm in my car, and I park my car, and I think, man, I could really just put the seat back and take a 45-minute nap now. I'm kind of tired and sore, but I know if I go there, I'll feel so much better afterwards. So I think it's just there's certain hard things that I don't want to do, but I know I feel better after it. And listen, it's not easy. There's a lot of work calls that I make that are kind of uncomfortable in real estate. And I just do them. I know that if I have to make 3 or 4 calls and 1 or 2 are going to be kind of uncomfortable, I try and do them first. And I know that once you can either procrastinate or you can do the hard things, and you'll feel better after. But it's definitely not easy. And I think that, again, kind of going back to the mindset, knowing that I guess reframing it and knowing that every day, it's kind of like the Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. He had he had that wonderful saying where he said every day as Roman emperor, he knew he was going to face cowards and liars and deceitful people and mean people and nasty people. And because he knew that, it wasn't a big surprise. He kind of accepted the reality. And he said, even this impossible situation, like one man trying to run the whole Holy Roman Emperor, I'm not going to let it get me down. I'm going to be happy in my situation. I think so that idea of motivation and discipline, because there's certain times where you're more motivated and less motivated, but there's the discipline. There's certain things that I want to do every day. And listen, there's times where I have a workout planned and the day gets away from me. And there'll be times where I'll run at midnight because I said in my mind I wanted to go for a run today, and I know if I do it, if I don't do it, sorry, I'll be a person whose word doesn't mean anything to him. And I believe that's really powerful if we tell ourselves something. But there's other days where the whole day goes to shit and I've had a bad day and I'm just like, it's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. And that's the beautiful thing, isn't it? You don't have to let something drag on for 5 days. You just say, this was a bad day. I wake up tomorrow. It's going to be a better day. And it really comes, again, it kind of comes down to mindset more than situation. But I guess the thing I want to stress, Paina, is it's easy for us to look at other people and think, oh, this guy's really good at whatever he's really good at. It must be easy for him. And we forget to see the struggles. And I was actually having a conversation yesterday with someone, there's that saying, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And, it's so easy for us to see the results of people and forget about the decade that preceded it, all the sacrifice and hard work and blood, sweat, and tears. And so it's a really good reminder, because we all have those instinctual feelings. And I don't know if it's jealousy or envy or whatever it is, but you see someone who's doing better than you in a certain field, and you're like, oh, I wish I had that, or I wish I could do that. But I just try and remember that everyone has their own struggles, and the real priceless things. There's a Naval Ravikant saying. He said, a fit body and a calm mind and a loving family are 3 things that money can't buy. And I think trying to focus on those as opposed to the fame and the prestige and the titles and the money and the this and that. It's like, yeah, it's nice to have if you can have it, but like, that's not what's driving me anymore. I used to write goals about, I want to do this and have this amount of sales and buy these rental properties. And now when I write my yearly goals, they're much more internal. Like, I want to be a better communicator with my wife. I want to be more present with my son when I take him to the park. It's kind of stepping back and trying to realize what's important in life.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Going on to discipline, I read a quote the other day and I was just like, wow, this is unbelievable. And it was like, discipline is the strongest form of self-love because it gives you everything you want. And I was like, I love that. So
I'm writing that down. That's really powerful.
Yeah, discipline is the strongest form of self-love because it gives you everything you want. And I was like, I like that. So it really kind of like resonated, and yeah, it's one of the things I'm going to kind of live by. But going slightly off track, and again on the same sort of lines as discipline, another achievement, and quote me again if I'm wrong, but achieving a 2nd degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. Again, congratulations. I mean, how has your martial arts journey contributed to like your personal development and like your discipline mindset and approach?
Louise, I would say, honestly, if there's the biggest single blessing in my life, is starting martial arts 31 years ago. And it's been the one constant in my life that's been difficult and so rewarding. And I met so many wonderful people. And I think it's linked to anything that I'm proud of in my life, even the relationship I have with my wife. I think you can trace it back to the roots of just having that journey in my life. It's enriched me so much. It's given me confidence. It's given me friendships. It's given me skills. It's given me the ability to realize I started a week before my 13th birthday. And within 6 months, I had realized that I had learned some skills through hard work. And suddenly I realized that's a growth mindset in action. I realized that if you put the work in at something, you can get better at something. So I realized that through martial arts, and it's been such a gift. It's been, it's not easier. My joints are more sore now. My back's more tight. It doesn't get easier. It's funny. I'm doing jiu-jitsu sometimes with these young lions, I call them, these young guys. I'm like, man, you could be my son. I'm 44 and the guy's 22. I'm like, he could be my son. It's so crazy. But it's been such a good big constant. And I've had this conversation with other people, but my son, it's a very tricky balance because I want to give him love and I want to support what he's really passionate about. But at the same time, I do know best because I'm an adult and he's 3.5. And I think in a year or two, I want him to start learning jujitsu. And I'm going to tell him, I'm not going to pressure him. He doesn't have to compete if he doesn't want to, but he has to know that this is what we do in this family. And actually, one of the reasons that I moved to this house is on this street, 2 doors down, is a person. I have a mutual friend about 8 doors down. He found this house for me, and he called me and he said, "You have to move this. This is the perfect place to raise your family." And he started selling me on the area. And he said, "Our mutual friend, who I didn't know at the time very well, but we've become close since, he has a jiu-jitsu school down the road, and he has 2 sons that do jiu-jitsu." And he said, "Think about your son growing up in that environment." And I think about he can do whatever else he wants as well, but he does have to have jujitsu in his life because I know what a gift it's going to be down the road. And I think so many young men, they don't have a rite of passage, and a lot of them don't have close friendships. They're spending time on screens all day, and there's all these terrible epidemics with technology. And it's going to give him priceless, it's going to open so many doors in the future. There's so many benefits, not just physical, not just spiritual. He's going to develop a strong spirit. There's so many things. I just think everything can be linked to that. And it's crazy. If I look back at my first job, I had a bunch of jobs when I was young, but my first real job before I started my trading group, my own trading company, I worked for a trading company in London. And I remember at the interview, it was about 2 days of interviews. I must have had 15 conversations with different traders and the head of the European desk, the head of the Dutch exchange, like all these different traders. And right at the end, I pretty much got the job, and I got to talk to the CEO, and he had to rubber stamp if they were going to hire me. And at the time, I'd been doing martial arts about 8 years, maybe 7 or 8 years. And we spent the whole time talking about martial arts because his wife was all into kickboxing, and he was like fascinated by it. So we spent 20 minutes talking about martial arts, and I got the job. And so it's like these little things, like who would have thought, it's like, it's opened up infinite amount of doors. And so I think it's been the greatest gift. And it doesn't mean it's been easy. There's been a dozen times I've wanted to quit over the years, like, oh, I'm too old for this. I don't need to do this anymore. Why am I still doing this? But it's one of those things where I keep coming back to the fact that when I was young, I used to think if I tick the boxes and I do hard things now, I'll have an easy life later. And now I realize that I don't really want an easy life. I want to do hard things that challenge me and force me to grow every day for the rest of my life.
Amazing. Thank you.
So I have a question. As traders, we sometimes, or frequently more so than not, I think in any profession, I think trading is a very unique profession where it's you against you. Yes. And you lose more than you win. And so it is so counterintuitive because in life we're so, winning and keeping yourself safe, and trading kind of defies every natural instinct in us for self-preservation. We literally put ourselves in harm's way over and over and over again. And I don't believe those people who say they never lose. That's a bunch of bullshit. Yes. Statistically, it's a bunch of bullshit. Numerically speaking is improbable, and we trade probabilities. So like that, to me, if anyone ever says that, I know you've never traded a day in your life. Yes. Good luck selling your course. But because everyone who doesn't do sells a course. But when you lose, or you have a string of events that cause you to like really, it's an ouch kind of thing. You sit there and you're like, wow, that really hurts. That's really scary. I lost a bunch of money when you were trading in a pit or with a company. You lose a bunch of money and you sit there and you're like, panic starts to set in because it's just a natural reaction. How did you and how do you deal with those days where like you think, because a lot of us trading, like when you trade, you equate profitability to safety. And when you have a bunch of losses, you now feel like your safety is compromised, right? So how did you and how do you recommend people come back from those days or process those days?
That's something the other day that really resonated with me because it made me feel really proud. I had a good friend of mine say, Lawrence, it's amazing that you're at a pretty high level in jiu-jitsu and you travel the world and you're still competing. That's like one aspect of your life. And then on top of that, you have your real estate, your real estate career. And then on top of that, you're doing podcasting. I'm publishing a book next week. I have a book launch party, and you're doing all these other things. It's like by having different buckets in your life, if one of them is going really badly, I feel like the other ones kind of can sustain you. So I use the analogy for money. Like if you look at a graph of my net worth the last 20 years, it looks like a bunch of mountain ranges, up, down, highs and lows. It's been, and if that was all I was looking at, I would probably have, some incredible swings in my emotion and things like that. But I think over time, I have a good friend who always tells me, it's like, Lawrence, the cream always rises to the top over time, right? Going back to averages and probabilities. So you can be unlucky, whether it's in trading, whether it's investments, whether it's in just investing in the market and the market's very volatile. You can be unlucky for a while, but over time, if you make the right decisions, it'll always even out. And I think so. Going back to trading, when I was trading options, and they tend to revert to a mean. So you could definitely lose a lot of money if you're selling options that can go parabolic. But as long as you're trading with a certain strategy that is, you're managing your risk, you'll definitely have periods where it doesn't go well. But I think you have to just stick to your strategy. You can't let emotions come in. And my old trading boss was hilarious. He would do these trades that would lose money, and then he would go and take a 20-minute cigarette break. And then in the meanwhile, I'd be in the pit making all this money. He'd miss all this opportunity, and then he would come back. And he was the worst trader ever. The only reason he was the boss is because he was the boss of Chicago, and the owner of the company was in New York, and he had set up the owner of the company with his wife, and they were personal friends. But he was this horrible trader. We made money as a group, but he was the worst trader of the group, and everyone else made money, and he took all the profit. It was hilarious. But just I used to see that, and I thought, well, he's trading purely on emotion. Like he'll make a bad trade because he had a huge ego, and then he'd be frustrated, and he'd go take a cigarette break for 20 minutes, and he'd miss all the good trades. So I think the consistency and sticking to a strategy when it comes to whether it's trading or investing, but I think also not getting too tied up. I mean, I do like talking about failures because I think it's easy. You both of you have been so nice to me and talking about some of the good things in my life, but I love sharing the bad things because I think it's important to know that we're all dealing with our own demons. And so I'm still dealing with the bad decision I made with a developer I partnered with years ago. And we haven't spoken in several years, but I've got to give evidence for a lawsuit. One of the guys that he stole a bunch of money from me. He did a bunch of shady stuff. We were involved in all these lawsuits. He ended up declaring bankruptcy. So I just wrote the money off. I said, that was a really painful, costly lesson, but it was a good lesson. And I'm actually partnered with two other developers now who are, I trust with my life. They're wonderful. So I feel like it was incredibly costly, but it was worth it to realize it's only money. I can make it again. But the consequences just drag on. It's like this never-ending nightmare where I have to give evidence next week in this court case with someone else that's suing him. And I'm just like, really? Like, I've already lost a bunch of money. It's been this emotional roller coaster. I just want to wipe my hands of it and just be done and move on. But the legal system in America is just ruthless, and it's just dragging on and dragging on and dragging on. So it's not like I'm immune to these things, but I let it get me down. I definitely do for a little bit. And then I say, okay, I've had my pity party. I felt sorry for myself. I bitched to my wife, and now I gotta move on. And I think the idea of money is I think money is a fascinating topic, and it's something that I really believe everyone should spend a lot of time thinking about and getting a good handle on how they see money. And you have some people that they say things like money is the root of all evil. They're probably never going to have a lot of money because they have such a negative attachment to money.
Mm.
And then you have other people that they think that money's going to give them happiness, and they waste a decade of their youth chasing it to only realize that actually it doesn't give you happiness. And so I think just having a good relationship with money is an amplifier. Money is a tool. I think money is very important if you live in, the three of us live in countries where it's not that cheap to pay our bills. So it is important to have money, but just having a good relationship where I realized that I had a good friend of mine tell me when I was at kind of my low point with this whole debacle with this guy and losing all this money. He said, Lawrence, you have a lovely family and you live in a nice house. Like, yes, you don't, maybe you lost a whole chunk of your savings, but your day-to-day life hasn't changed. And I don't need to have a bunch of zeros in my bank account to be happy. And I realized that one thing you kind of touched on, Fina, is I don't need to have, if someone gave us a suitcase with $10 million, all our money problems would just go out the window. But I guarantee you I would lose a lot of my own motivation. And I feel like I get so much out of just working on things. And I do have a bit of drive to make money. And so I like that drive. I don't necessarily want to not have that drive anymore. I don't like it's like when you hear about those people that win the lottery and they get this big injection of money, no one's happier right after. So I think trying to stretch things out is really important. I just realized a few months ago that I had so much success from 22 to 30. And then from 30 to 35, I was kind of following my dreams, fighting and traveling the world. And then from 35, I switched careers and I made a lot of financial mistakes leading up to there. And I went through a real kind of lull for a few years. And I really only came out of it when I met my wife. And I was in a good relationship in a better place. But I realized that the reason for that big funk was because I had too much success early on. And then we're humans are happiest when we're improving, not when we're absolutely somewhere. So it's kind of like that wonderful study about the Olympians. The second place winner is always way more miserable than the third place, because the third place, the person who gets the bronze medal in the Olympics, they realized they were only one spot on against not making the podium. So they are so thankful that they didn't come fourth, they came third and they got a medal. But the silver medalist is so frustrated because they were one place from the gold and it eats up. And there's all these studies that talk about that. So it's such a good reminder. It's not absolute success that makes us happy. It's progression and improvement. So with the money thing, if you can just have a good relationship with money and realize that you don't have to have this financial safety, you never have to work again or worry again the rest of your life. You want a little bit of stress and a little bit of financial motivation. And so that's been a really, again, all of this is interesting because I know you're both very big in mindset, and we keep coming back to mindset. It's the way we look at things, not the actual situation. I think it's the same with money. I'm so much happier now, even though my net worth is way lower than it was at different parts of my life. But business is good and I can pay the bills, and that's enough. And I'm very confident in my future.
You have such a great mindset, Lawrence, honestly. But I think, like for me, when it comes to money, I've worked on sort of things like beliefs and so forth, but it's about having choices. It's about, it gives you more choices, more freedom in a way.
Exactly.
But I have found personally over my life, the best experiences I've actually had are the times where it hasn't cost money. Like walking barefoot in nature. And I talk about that a lot. Listening to the lambs in the field, like all of these things. And it's not, I'm not disregarding money. We all need money, but it's those times where you just think, well, actually, these are special moments. Like, and you look up at the stars and you think, do you know what, there's abundance all around us all of the time. And sometimes our perception is so blinkered because people are sometimes consumed with worry and what's going on and the busy life and so forth, and what we haven't got because we're forward thinking and achievers. But it's finding that balance again, isn't it, between kind of having that abundant mindset and really kind of go, well, these are my goals too. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to stay in the middle. And but I guess.
Yeah, but I think what Lawrence touched up on was the people who win the lottery and the poverty mindset. Statistically, they lose most of their money within the first year because there is and they already are given a chance, right, at making everything better and different, and yet the mind, they're programmed to behave and live a certain way. And when you look at how many of them retain that wealth, it's like a really minimal amount of people who did something with that money, which is mind-boggling, right? Like you think, oh, if I get a bunch of this money, all my problems will be solved. But sometimes it just gets you more expensive problems because essentially it's, yes, mindset, but also we're not really taught money management. We're taught so many other things that people don't know what to do, and so they go and they buy a bunch of shit they don't need, right? They go, and it's like this because we're also taught to acquire, to money and wealth is like the cars, and people go berserk. But what they haven't gotten is the proper money management. And I think we teach so much in school, but we don't teach kids how to do that. So as an adult coming into it, you're going to make a bunch of bad decisions. And I bet you I can do more with like, $1,000 than the people did with $1 million they won. But it's just, it's very interesting.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's so true because
no.
if we live in a society where people spend $75 to take a photo in front of a private plane they don't own. We're such a backward Western society when it comes to money.
Yeah.
And it's two very different skills. You can be a great surgeon, and you can become very, very wealthy through surgery, but yet you'll have no idea on how to keep that money, how to invest it properly, how to protect against inflation, all these different things. So it's too, I didn't realize this when I was young. It's a very different skill to make money as to keep money and invest it. And I agree. Louise, you said something about money is gives you options. So I just, having said what I just said, I do want to clarify that I do believe that money is important if you use it well. And I think it's an amplifier. If you're a happy person without much, you're going to be a happy person when you're wealthy. The problem is too many people are miserable without money, and they think that if they get money, they're going to be happy. And then that's a really awful lesson, because when you're poor and miserable, at least you have the hope that if I can get wealth, I'll be happy. But I think there was a Will Smith talked about it when he became successful and wealthy. He got so depressed because he realized that he was thinking my happiness is going to come from this, and then when I got it, I was miserable because I didn't change. But it really is, it gives you, you can buy back your time. You can outsource things you don't want to do. I love to spend money on experiences, travel, things like that. These once in a lifetime experiences, as opposed to buying possessions I don't need. But Louise, what you said it reminds me of this wonderful quote about the little things, like walking with your feet in the sand. It's in the dew of little things that the heart finds its morning and is refreshed. And the older I get, the more I realize that that's what it's about. The things that don't cost money, or a little bit of money, a nice dinner with good company, they're the things that really give me the most happiness.
You just made me think of a quote: when all your wishes come true, all your dreams will be shattered. And
yes.
so so there is something beautiful about not having it all, because what's the point? I mean, like, if tomorrow you woke up and you have everything you've ever wanted, I mean, you can pack it in. I mean, what else is there to do? What are you going to do in the next 30, 40 years? Like, that's a long time to just sit around and do nothing. And I think if we, there's so many things that, like, I personally find joy in, like painting and reading and creating, and, my little stupid grandma-ish craft projects with, like the latch hook. But there's like the moments of peace where I'm incredibly content with, like, my acrylic paints and my canvas, and I'm very content. And collectively it was like $20, right? But
Yes.
People have a lot less fun. I was watching something today, and there was a lady throwing a fit at the F1 in Miami, like 2 days ago. This young girl was throwing a fit because she didn't get the table of her choice, and she literally had a meltdown. And I'm thinking about, like, holy crap, we are so warped. Like, our minds are getting so crazy, where she's in this beautiful experience that most people could never afford. And she's like literally crying tears over this table that she wanted. And I'm like, I just think as a society, in a lot of ways, we're not going the right way. And I, like
Yes.
Louise said, going back to simplicity of things, and just, it's all around. And the day I cry over a table, I literally will ask someone to take me out. I'll ask one of my friends, be like, take me, because I'm things are not going. Check on your girl. She's not doing well. This is not, like, literally, I'll allow people to take me out, because this is,
I think
not this.
I think we're all in the same mindset. I don't know. Well, I know we all do this, but for me, I don't watch mainstream media. I have to be careful with the word. I don't watch the news. I don't read it. I have no interest in it. I haven't watched it for many years. No intention to. And I think it's the same with social media. I have detoxes, and I think it's important for us, because you can sit there scrolling, and I'm going to be honest, it's madness out there. I mean, I look, and sometimes I actually wonder what planet I'm on. I'm like, I'm not going to go too much into detail about the things that I'm talking about and the things that you see, but I think we have to be in a space where we have to just go back to, our true essence. I think it's really important for us, isn't it? And it brings me on to the question, Lawrence. You moved, I think it was was it a year ago, to a
About
place?
a year and a half ago.
Yeah, which has brought you and your family a lot of joy. So let's talk about that before we wrap up our show, if that's okay. If you want to describe where you live and what it brings you.
Well, thank you. It's it kind of, I have such a nice visual image of you barefoot walking on and enjoying nature, and I feel like that's exactly what we get here. And it's so nice because the spring is here, and I I go to the city, it's about an hour drive, and I was so nervous about the drive, but I have to make so many calls. I just use it for my call time, and it's actually been very productive for business. But I get home and it feels like a world away. Before I was in downtown, I lived in high rises for over 20 years, and just there's always, police cars and sirens and ambulances and just traffic noises. And it's just you get used to it. It's like the urban vibrations. You just kind of you get used to it, and it doesn't, I can sleep. I used to have a train that went past they would run these night trains past my window, and you just doesn't even bother you. You're just so used to it. And then you don't realize that the tension, I just think it's so unnatural. Until I moved here, I didn't realize that I always had a bit of tension. And now when I come home, if I work from home, I'm just so content and at peace. And I see deer in my backyard and just these beautiful birds of prey, hawks and things. And it's so wonderful to give that environment for my son. Like at night, he's 3.5, and he's getting into animals, and he's like, Daddy, let's take dogs and see frog, because there's a couple of frogs that we go see at there's a little pond at the bottom of the garden. Just these little things. It really does come down to just being in an environment that suits you. And I think all of us, we live in different places. We found an environment that we feel it suits us. Like I'm so much happier here than, I'm from a suburb of London. If I was living in London, I would be so miserable compared to being here. So I think we have to, it's going to take some time, but we definitely have to put ourselves in a physical situation where we're just calm and at peace. And it's so wonderful seeing my wife too. She's a country girl at heart. And she's even happier than I am here, just being outside when the sun comes out and just enjoying that little piece of nature and living on a few acres. I just think it's so healthy and it's so wonderful. And it's been the best decision I made. And it really, life comes down to a few important decisions. And they say there's a wonderful book on happiness by Gad Saad called The Sad Truth About Happiness. And he says the two most important decisions we make is our romantic partner and our vocation. And I think I've been so lucky, just that those little decisions that I made. When I put myself out there, and I didn't do this too much, but I reached out to my wife at the time and I asked her to go on a date, and we had one mutual friend, and it was kind of awkward. And I put myself out there, the date went wonderful, and now we live together. So it's like putting yourself out there with these decisions. And the same with, we talked about, we're not trying to fight life, trying to see what life gives you. I was so unhappy in Chicago, and I was trying to figure out what is the next step. And I wasn't even thinking Northwest Indiana. I didn't have my Indiana license at the time, so I wasn't really looking at property here. I wasn't even thinking about it. And then I just had, and this guy, my neighbor who I'm friends with at the time, we were friends, but we weren't like close friends. I didn't talk to him very much. I didn't see him very much, but I trust him, and he's a very smart ER doctor, and he's a bit older than me, and he's like an older brother to me. And when he started texting me, I thought he was joking. Yeah, it's 1 a.m. I'm a night owl, so I was doing some late night work. I may or may not have taken a marijuana edible, so I was a little high. And I was sitting there, and I was just in a really good place. And he sends me all these texts. He's like, Lawrence, I found your dream home. And I could have been like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you know what? Like, he's a smart guy. I really thought about it for a few minutes, and he starts texting me. He's at work, he's bored, he's working nights, and he's sending me all these messages. He's kind of selling it to me. And I just, after about an hour, I realized, like, this is it. This is the next step. And I hadn't even seen the house. So my wife saw it and loved it, and I put an offer in without even seeing it because I was tied up that day in work. And I just knew it. It's like when you come to these decisions in life, you have to just be bold. You have to just don't go back and forth. You have to just go, and what's the worst that can happen? I lived here for a year and I hate it. You can always come back. It's not irreversible decisions. But I think just being bold and making those decisions, because a lot of my friends in Chicago thought I was crazy. Like, what are you doing? That you're a city boy. You go to Indiana. Like, what are you gonna do there? So just trying to be bold in the times that matter, I think, is so important. But yeah, it's been wonderful, and I think it's the same with if you hear this a lot with troubled people. Say you're a troubled youth and you're in gangs and you're just in this terrible situation. It's going to be very hard to get out of that if you stay in that physical environment.
Yeah.
But if you can somehow just get a one-way ticket somewhere else, you can reinvent yourself. I think that's so important. It's not easy. You're going to leave all your friends behind, your life behind. But I think there's certain times where you just have to get out of the environment you're in and get in a new environment. I think that's very important. And I think I think all three of us are blessed because we've done that.
But that is that sign, maybe, after the edible, you're like, God, is that you? But
Yes.
but overall, you were presented with something, right? You could have fought it, but you
Mm,
surrendered to what was in front of you. And instead of having other ideas about identity that we assign to ourselves, I'm a city boy. I was a city girl, right? I'm a New
mm,
York City girl. I have never lived on the hill surrounded by a rainforest and a beach, like as not something that I've ever experienced before, with nobody around me. Like I have to make an effort to go see people where I couldn't get away from people. I lived in a building, high rise in New York City. You can imagine, like roaches. But now it's like a whole, when these identities we assign ourselves, like people who say, oh, I'm not good in math, so I can't be a trader. I thought that, but then I changed my mindset and here I am. So I think, instead of labeling ourselves, we should continue to be in a state of wonderment and the self-discovery, right? It's not over. It's not done until you're in the ground. And even then, I don't think it's over. It's just
I love
another,
that.
whatever, wherever you go. But I think
Yeah.
it's a living in wonderment and self-discovery will keep you from depression because it's not over. It's not, it's you discovering what else is there. You wake up every morning, I try to go, well, I wonder what today will bring, right? I open my eyes and I go, whoa, today is like completely unknown. I have no idea what's going to happen today. How cool, and you go and discover the day as opposed to saying, I'm going to do this today. And I'm going to, oh, well, today didn't go my way because I had this idea and it didn't. That's it. My day is ruined. I'm going to go home. So if you just wake up and say, I wonder, like, I just wonder, well, what, and then everything you discover the day as it goes, good and the bad.
I think it's almost being
Maybe,
curious, like a child, isn't it? Like having the
yeah,
curiosity.
children live like that. They don't know.
Absolutely,
They have
yeah.
no
They
concept
just,
of time.
yeah, they get, I think it's important to have that childlike kind of approach
Curiosity.
mindset. So,
Mhm.
Louise, I was just gonna say that. I was gonna say that's what I've learned from my son. It's just
all right.
it's the wonder of the small things. I'll be going somewhere with him and he'll just stop because the wind is blowing and he sees a leaf just blowing in the wind. And for him, that leaf is so fascinating. And it's such a good reminder for me. I'm thinking in my head, like, we got to get going because we've got to be here at this time, or I'm not in the moment. And he is so in the moment. And so that completely, or exactly what I was going to say, Louise, you hit it on the head. And find it that idea of just not knowing what to expect and being open to life, I think is so important. Like when I was young, I wanted to read every good book and watch every good movie and travel to every exotic destination. And now I'm like, I want to spread it out the rest of my life. There's always going to be books I want to read and there's always going to be places I want to visit. I don't want to go tomorrow. I've wanted to go to Japan for 15 years and I'm finally going in a few months to compete for jiu-jitsu. But I've been looking forward to that for 15 years. I know I was going to go at some point. I just didn't know when. And I think that's going to really bring you happiness, is having that mindset, that childlike curiosity and wonder and being in the moment. Kids and dogs live in the moment. And it's such a good reminder for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important for us to have purpose, to have plans, to always kind of be grateful for what we've got, but always go, you know what, this is a journey. I'm going to embrace the journey. The highs, the lows, the good, the bad, the ugly, the sweat, the tears, all of that. I'm just going to embrace this amazing journey because it's a special one, isn't it? So Lawrence, it has been, we could talk to you for hours, honestly. Like, you are just such a joy to talk to, and I'm sure the listeners are just gonna want more, want you back on, like we
We're
will.
going to do the 2025 catch up. We should do this like a yearly tradition where we meet and we're like, and Lauren says, like, what other marathon have you run? And like, what other belt do you have? But
Well, listen,
you'll be
I'm
living
always here.
in
It's
Idaho.
it's such a pleasure to talk to kindred spirits, and it's like we kept coming back to the same things. It's just having the right mindset, and all three of us have worked really hard to work on it. And it's definitely, if there's one lesson from this conversation with someone listening, it's just is try to reframe things, and you're going to get a lot more happiness out of life, because no one can control our situation, but we can all control our mindset. And my son's name's Victor, and one of the reasons is he's named after Viktor Frankl. And he was famous for writing his book and surviving the Nazi death camps. And he was saying, like, one of the reasons he survived is because they took everything from him except his mind. Like, he still controlled his mind. And it's just such a powerful lesson. I always want to remind that to my son. Like, we have a choice. Like, we don't have a choice the situations we're in, but we have a choice with our mindset. And I think it's been such a beautiful reminder with both of you. And this is what a lovely start for me to start my day with this conversation. It's such a pleasure. I'll come on whenever you guys want. It's a real honor.
Oh, thanks,
I'm in.
Lois. Sorry, Faina.
No, I said I'm in. I'm excited.
Oh,
Let's see what else happens. Yearly catch-ups.
Yeah, absolutely. Annual catch-ups. But I think you're exactly right. Before we end the show, I think you're right. It is about the right, having that mindset. No one else can take our thoughts or our mind or our consciousness away. It's ours, and it's how we use it is how, what's important. So Lawrence, thank you again. We will see you very soon.
Thank you.
Bye for now. See you next week. See you next time.